everyone, welcome to Bargain Gaming, where we can play excellent games without busting our wallets. Before we leave Nobunaga's ambition, after now we've won playing as Oda Nobunaga. This is our third iteration. I was thinking before we leave this game, I think it might be a good idea to put together some ideas on how what a winning strategy would be for a new player to play this game and how to win in this game. In our current strategy for Oda's campaign was that we concentrated on using our castles to be the strike base, or meaning the castles will concentrate on producing food and soldiers and minimize a little bit the emphasize gold production. And then the fortresses around it will be producing more gold and food and less of soldiers, like this one, like Inuyama. See, soldier production here is the least. Now, in every province, as defined by this line around this, there is one castle and then a lot of fortresses around it. And some of the fortresses are very small. The reason why we want the castle to be heavy in food production and soldier production is because it has a lot of land around it, especially here on the plains. On the plains, castles usually have between 8 to 10 parcels of land that it can develop, while fortresses, not necessarily so. Like in this case, this fortress has, let's check, it has, this one is not open. Let's look at this one. Kutsut. So this one has 1, 2, 3, 6 parcels of land. And this is already considered pretty good because it is in the plains area. In the mountainous area, like this one, over here, it has only 3. 4 is actually good. Usually it's almost always it's just 3. Like this one has only 3. 1, 2, and 3. And so usually 3 because the default that every time we build a fortress that has some land near it, except right in the top of a mountain sometimes. So it will have 3 parcels of land, and one is automatically dedicated to food production, which is this. This is gold production, and this is soldier production. So the flat area like this gives us a whole lot mess of land. So this is 4, 7, 10. So there are 10 parcels of land. And therefore we have, that's why we can dedicate 1, 2, 3, 4 parcels to soldier production and 4 parcels to food production and only 2 parcels to gold production. And that's why we would like to concentrate, in this case, why the castle will be concentrated in producing soldiers. So that's why in this case the soldiers produced in Kiyosu is about 17,000. This one in Gifu, the soldiers produced here was 21,000 because it has much larger areas. Or I mean, the same 10 parcels of land, but the ratings of the land is much higher. And we can see that each parcel of land is rated based on S is the best, A, B, C, D, E. So with E being the worst. So like this one, like this parcel of land here has a B production for crops, and it will produce 1,300 worth points of food, while only 735 points of gold and 735 points worth of conscripts. This is not exactly the amount of food or number of conscripts produced, just points wise, meaning points. That means the rating here B is much better than the rating of C here, which is only 882. Here this is 1,300. And so Like the A crafts here is 1500, and there's only one or two that has an S rating. I think that is in Odawara Castle. So it's important, therefore, to concentrate on food and conscripts production and de-emphasize gold production in the castle, and let the fortresses around it be concentrated in producing food and gold. So, however, the caveat to conscript production is that each fortress or castle cannot produce more soldier points than food points. In this case, Kiyosu has 4,800 worth of food points as against 3,400 of conscript points or soldier points, and 2,900 of gold points. I'm talking about points. This is not exactly the amount of food they produce, but the points gives us an understanding of its relationship to other castles and other fortresses, and also to each other. So in this case, Kiyosu is producing 4,800 worth of food points, and it has more than the 3,400 soldier points. Allows us to fully produce the amount of conscripts under the fourth. Let me rephrase it this way: a castle or a fortress cannot produce more conscripts that it can feed, and therefore, if our soldier points of 3,400 is bigger than the food points, which currently is at 48, if that's instead of 48, it is 2,800, then there will be the soldier points will have a big red line underneath it. So that even if we dedicate all the land around it to conscript or soldier production, but we don't have enough food, we will have like 5,000 soldier point or conscript points, but the amount of soldiers we will produce is limited by the amount of food points we have. If we have, instead of 4,800, just 1,000 food points, we will only be producing 1,000 soldier points. So even if we have like 5,000 on soldier points, the 4,000 soldier points will be blocked out by a red shading. So that means we can only produce 1,000 points worth of conscripts, which makes sense, right? How can you produce more soldiers than your castle can feed? Because at this point in time, it's very hard for food to be transferred from fortress to castles, especially given our domain of this size. Say, assuming we are producing more soldiers than we're producing food. In theory, let's say another castle over here is the one producing the food, so that overall, domain-wise, we might have the food to produce to feed our soldiers. But if the food is being produced here, it cannot be consumed by the soldiers that are being trained here. So that's why each castle and each fortress has to have enough food to feed its soldiers. If not, we will have like huge red bars that I have. Yeah, like this one. This one has a huge red bar. And why? It's because it has 2 soldier production points here, right? This one is 1,100, and this is 278. So 11. That's almost 1,400, as against this is the only food produced, which is 890 or 900. So 1,400 versus 900. So that the difference is represented by the red bar. So that means we can only raise so many soldiers because we cannot feed them. And that makes sense. So it's important. That's one key point to understand, because if not, it becomes very frustrating when we're gearing up for war and we start dedicating more and more land to conscripts, and then we'll find out we cannot raise them anyway. So the only thing that gets bigger is the red line number. It just gets bigger and bigger relative to the amount of white line or the white space that we are looking at. Like in this case, the red line is so much bigger, right? here, the red line as against the white line. The white line is the amount of soldiers we can raise. The red line is there is so much excess capacity, but we can't use it because we can't feed those guys. And if we can see that, we can see that the maximum number of soldier points is 891. Although if we look at the land itself, from here when we add both of these numbers up, it comes up to almost 1400. But it doesn't show that. It only shows 891. So that means because only 891 points of soldiers can be fed by 891 points of food. So that's very important. So in this case, even when we want to concentrate our castle into food and conscript production, it has to be supported by enough food. So that, and then we can dedicate the other fortresses into gold and food production, because going to war requires a lot of food, and that is why the other fortresses need to produce more food. And the reason why I have this specialization in terms of castles and fortresses is because when we send out a team, it is always better to send out an army that is comprised of at least 3 officers. In our situation here, all of our troops are comprised of 3 officers. If we look at this, there are always 3 officers. The reason for that is that each officer has a trait, has a combat trait. So if we look at, say, Minowa, and we look at the soldiers, and we look at Yoshitake Satomi, and using the right shoulder button, we can go to traits. So these are the traits for combat, and each soldier or samurai has a different trait. So some of those traits are actually complementary to each other. Is that like somebody that has like assuming one of these soldiers that we have, so a trio of soldiers can, when they meet the other army, they use their specializations, those traits, to trigger abilities. And when they trigger abilities, they can cause confusion, strengthen our attack, or can confuse the other army, or raise our attack, or in this case, each one has different traits, which is signified on the right side. Tactics: rapid assault raises melee attack, inspire raises defense. So those are complementary. And snipe momentarily greatly raises ranged attack. So if we have muskets with us, then snipe actually makes sense. And so if we have 3 officers in that army group, we have 3 traits or 3 combat abilities that we can trigger. If we're going up against an army of equal number and equal ability, because this army is determined by not just the number but also the abilities in terms of leadership, valor, and intelligence. So if we're and then we have a number of soldiers here, 8,000. Assuming we go up against an army of 9,000, but they have only 1 samurai with them. So that means we can trigger 3 combat abilities while the other side can only trigger 1. And so assuming if we can trigger an ability that say the other side also triggers rapid assault, so we will have same rapid assault which would offset his, but then we will have an inspire which increases our defense more than the other side, so we will now do more damage to them. And then if we have snipe, we can actually hit them from distance, and we have like we have a first strike advantage. We get to hit them a lot harder. And so if we don't have 3 officers in the army, we're giving up an advantage. So it's always better to have 3 officers with abilities in our army. Even if the third guy or the second guy or one of them is pretty low in terms of leadership or valor, having one with a trait is better than having none. Okay, anyway, so when we send them out, And the thing is that when we have those three guys, especially I try to group the top three guys together. So when we go out, we will always take damage when we encounter the enemy. And when we take damage, every time we deploy, like say we deploy this one. So when we deploy, we always bring a bunch of horses and a bunch of muskets. And horses cost money, and muskets cost even more money. And when we suffer damages, we lose horses and we lose muskets. So therefore, we have to buy them again from the merchant. And if we look at the merchant, we'll see that look at muskets. Muskets cost like 47 gold pieces per 10. So that's 4.7 gold per item and so that's a lot of money. So look at the rice that we can sell. We can sell rice for 10 cocoa of rice. We only get 15 bucks, while the 10 rifles cost 47. That's more than 3 times, and therefore it is very expensive. And horses cost a little bit more, like 25-30% more. And so we suffer damages every time we go out. So if we send our A team, that's why in this playthrough, I classify our team as an A team. Like this guys over here, I classify them as A team because if we go to their valor and leadership, look, we have like it's just amazing. Or even we go here, we have very strong leaders. We're strong fighters, and we have also strong intelligence. And therefore, so when we send them out, the high intelligence means it's more likely chance that if we have causing them like confusion on the enemy, we have a higher chance of making it happen if they have lower intelligence than we do. And also our attacks, everything is comparative. It's like if they're as intelligent as we are, sometimes our triggering those attack moves doesn't happen because they saw through it. So those are so intelligence, valor, and leadership are very important. The politics is really for administration, meaning development of land, all kind of stuff. So that's doesn't go much into battle. But the three important traits that go into battle would be the leadership, the valor, and the intelligence. So by grouping the three strongest one into our strike base, first we're going out with a bigger army because it's coming from a castle. And then when we hit the enemy, we are hitting them with a more unified, very strong fighter. We will suffer less damage, and therefore we will suffer less expense when we have to recover, when we have to replace horses and replace muskets. Soldiers we don't replace. That's okay. That's no problem, because we constantly conscript. We raise them through conscript. But that is my my basis for winning this campaign for Oda. And now to get to the nitty-gritty of land development is that here we can see that my land development, I would concentrate on initially, like in any piece of land, we have the choices of what kind of development we want. Hold on. Like I said, each piece of land has a rating, and therefore, so like this has a rating of A for crops. Therefore, I assign crops for that particular land. Here it has a rating for C because I don't find anything except usually it's just C here is pretty good. So this one is good for conscripts. This one is also good for conscript because D is pretty good. And this one also D is pretty good. So that's why in here we have only this default parcel that was dedicated to crafts because that's a default. That's the only one. And this one will be purely production of food and soldiers. And what is its rating right now? It is still not so good, because if we change this, so right now it's about even. It's like 2,800 for crops production and 480 for gold production and 2,600 for conscripts production. So this one, we will have, under the current setup, we will have enough food because we have 2,800 versus 2,600. There will be enough food. Right now, it's still showing a red bar. It's simply because we have not fully developed the top part. So there's still a lag, right? Every time we develop the food production, the red bar on the conscripts will shorten. Will get less and less, because that means we're getting more food. Because right now the potential for the food production is 2,800. We are only at 1,900, and the potential for conscript production is at 2,600, but we have only enough to feed 1,900. So that's why there's a white space, a dark space. The dark space is the difference between 1,900 and 1,600, and the red space, and there's a red bar, is the difference between 1,900 and 2,600. So here we can see 2,600 is the potential for conscripts. 2,600 at the lower bottom, it says conscripts 2,600, and then it will turn to 3,000 if we convert this into conscripts production. So that's why the lower bar here, conscripts, although it's showing 1,600, that is the level of conscripts that has developed right now. And the black line is the difference between 1929, which is the crops production, which is the amount of food this castle, this fortress is producing, versus the amount of conscripts it's producing, and that's a black line. And then the red line is the difference between 1929 and it's the full amount of conscripts, which is 2,600. And the black line of the food line of 1900, 1929, the black line represents the difference between 1929 and 2,800, which is shown here, which is 2,811, which has an A at the bottom, 2,811. So that means if we convert this particular parcel of land from food production to conscripts production, that means it will lower down potential of food production from 2,811 to 1,689, and will boost conscript production from 2,600 to 3,000. But then, well, like I said, there's no point to that. If we do this, our red line will become longer, and then the top food line will, instead of 1929, will go down to 1,600. It will now be full. So it's important how we develop the land, that it's balanced. And then, aside from developing the land in that way, or specializing in the land, there is a further level of development, meaning how do we put this into, assuming we dedicate this land already into food production. Now we're given, so once we do that, we get this commons. So we can turn that specialized piece of land into further areas. Like, can do we want it to produce more gold, or do we want to produce it more crops or the surrounding areas? And then subsequent to that, it can produce more crops and conscripts. Or do we want to do like temples? So these are finer, meaning how do we further refine the development of the land? Now, each parcel or each type of production have a different type of specialization, a different level of refinement. So we can produce this. Let's say if this was a castle, we might go for early part of the game to theater and no theater. Reason for this is, and this is what I usually take, is that I aside from the specialization of castles and fortresses, I my priority in developing land is in terms of population growth, because the population determines the amount of conscripts we can get. That's why I said it's only when we're seeing those things on the food numbers, economic crafts numbers, and conscript numbers. They're only points. They represent something equivalent to as a ratio of the total population. The population is the one that determines how. The bigger the population, the more conscripts do we get. It's like Gifu has a population of 76,000. See, that is a huge population. As against this one has a population of 50,000. And therefore, the soldiers produced here, we see, is only 7,000, while Gifu can produce 21,000. So not only is it based on the amount of land dedicated to producing conscripts, but it also depends on the population base. So 50,000, even if they have the same numbers as this one, will not produce 21,000. The max it can produce right now is only 7,000, which is about a third of Gifu, because the population base in Gifu is big. So is like all the castles. Castles have much bigger populations than fortresses. This one has also a 78,000 population base. So that's why it's easier to turn out larger armies and commanded by superior officers. So we have three superior officers, a larger army, which you send into the field. They can crush the opponent much faster. Say we have a 10,000 army here, and when we go up against somebody that comes at us with two separate armies or three separate armies of, let's say, 33,500 each. So total together, three generals with three separate armies come at us, as against we have one army against them. We will win, even if the generals are the same, because we can trigger more items, we can trigger more battle tactics. Our impact will be more solid. It will be 10,000 facing against 3,500, because when they come against us, especially in the narrow passes like here, or when we're fighting them, unless they're defending a castle, if we're fighting them, it's usually one-on-one. They will line up, and so will we. We'll be lining up like this. And so if we meet an enemy right here, it's only these guys, and these guys will be fighting against this guy. And so we will be 10,000 fighting against. We'll be, in short military terms, we'll be defeating them in detail. So they can approach us in little pieces, and we can wipe them out in little pieces, while our army is hitting them 10,000 against 3,500. Of course, the 10,000 almost always wins. Okay, so that is the biggest strategy: is specialization on land use, as a fighting platform, using three officers, and then concentrating our strike power in certain castles only. And in fortresses, treat them as supplemental support units that produces gold and food to help us fight the war. Okay, I guess, and then land use is very critical in this. It is not immediately obvious, but proper use of land use and also specialization of castles and fortresses allows us to produce big armies that can face off against smaller armies. And that's what we have been doing here. Big armies. Our armies are usually much bigger. We have fewer armies, but we have much bigger armies, and we clobber them all the time. Okay, I hope that helps. Thank you guys for your patience. I hope that was helpful. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me. I hope you'll join me in the next game. Bye.